Andy, you use this big word in your presentation, kenosis. Can you tell me what that word means? What's the background of that term, please?
Well, this is my upper Midwestern humility. Is in some sense I don't know that I'm the person qualified to define that, and there's been so many incredible theologians who've done significant work with that. But if I took my stab at it, and really who I'm leaning on here is this great New Testament scholar named Michael Gorman, who's written these really interesting books about the place of kenosis and how it connects to other significant theological themes in the Eastern tradition, theosis, hypostasis, things like that. But one of the things that Gorman has convinced me of, which I find really informative to think about ministry, is that kenosis in the Philippians text, it's often thought of, and we do this in youth ministry all the time, where we think of what it means in that Christ hymn in Philippians, that although Jesus was in the form of God, as we do that, we kind of think of the although as like, well, although God was really super cool and really powerful and really rich and mighty, he totally slummed it for a while and hung out with us so that we could be better people. We tend to think of, I think, kenosis that way. And what these theologians are saying that I'm really quite convinced about is that you can actually translate that word, and this is where I'm out of my depth, but you can translate that word, it's right to translate it as although, but you can also translate that word as because. Because God is like this, Jesus humbles himself and takes on our humanity. And that becomes really informative to me, that this act of kenosis is not something that I just kind of grunt and say, okay, I'm just going to become a less selfish person and I'm just going to empty myself. And there are a lot of really good critiques of certain kenotic theologies, especially certain feminist critiques and others that say, there are other populations of people who've had to self-empty or kind of evacuate certain kind of cultural commitments or whatever that could become quite abusive, an abusive theological perspective, and I'm wary of that and don't want to push in that direction. But what's helpful for me to think about the although is actually the because. Is that this is the very nature of God. And so kenosis doesn't become something that I do or even demand someone else does, but it becomes the lens of which this God comes into the world and this God acts, most fully seen in Jesus Christ, who becomes the servant, empties himself of this. And so that becomes significant to me, that this becomes the narrative shape, really, of God's own act within the world, that God always takes this move of humbling God's self and in meeting us in this way, not in this way of, well, God chooses to be treated poorly or God chooses to be a doormat. That's not really what I think that text means. I think it means that God actually chooses to become the foolish minister, become the Samaritan on the road that is willing to minister to the beaten man. That this is who this God is in God's very nature, and that the incarnate Christ then reflects that this is how this God acts. That this God comes to Israel to be Israel's father, and to be near to them and take them and embrace them and give them life again.